Rawr!
When did we all get this dumb?
Almost only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and nuclear warfare. I don't see any bodies, so it doesn't count.
I'm angry about tax.
I'm the chef. I want to hear one thing. Yes, chef.
Come on, man. Use your brain.
The Why I'm Angry podcast starts now.
Okay, it's the Why I'm Angry podcast. We are back. It is Thursday, and we're just, getting into some of the things that have been happening around the world with the UN. We're going to talk with Maugs here. We are here in the Freestyle Man Cave studio. Make sure that you're getting on and supporting our podcast by getting some merch at the new merch store. Get on our website. We've got some new ways that you can help us out and support us. We're closing in on that 50th episode, and we're just going to celebrate here shortly. And Moggs, you're here. You're back.
Okay, yes, good to see you again. Glad
All
to
right.
hear things are going well for you. Good to check
Been
in.
been a little while. I think the last one we were in July. We had the issue with Honest Abe, and we've done a little podcast with him
Sure. Yeah.
recently, and that's on our website. So get on and check that out to find out what's going on with him. But yeah, we're going to talk about the UN. And this is one of the things that I talked about a couple podcasts back or a couple episodes back, weeks back, that when the UN takes over a country like Haiti, as the police force, you think, okay, they're just going to come in, do some security stuff, but where does that lead to? No country has ever called the UN to come in and just police, just be the regular police because they've had too much gang violence and crime. And so I thought it would be good if we figure out what the UN is. So Moggs, I know I put you on the research assignment to kind of figure out, to
Sure.
kind of
Yep.
do some of that.
Sure.
So
Yep.
what is the UN, and
Okay.
what's the purpose?
Well, the UN started in 1945, right after World War II. And as you probably know, the idea was for a bunch of countries to get together and try to establish world peace. And I think their charter, it talks about three different things. They wanted to uh, have a collaborative effort where countries would get together and develop ways of preventing war. It also talks about then the capacity for it to reach out across international borders and maintain health and welfare for people. And then the third, and more recently, they talk about climate change. So their uh, initial efforts were very wide and kind of general in terms. And certainly the idea is good. It's done. Actually, the United Nations has done a lot of good things with um, helping maintain peace, or at least minimize war in Africa. They're very active in Africa in terms of uh, prevention of genocides. They've helped a lot with global pandemics. And they do a lot of catastrophic work when there's catastrophes hit with hurricanes and tornadoes and tsunamis. So I think their intent has always been good, and they've done a lot of good things. But it's kind of like the old adage that there's a place where some people get too big for their britches, and what happens is they start to reach into uh, other aspects of society and nations in a way that may not be quite beneficial in the long run. The other big thing to keep in mind is the United Nations was developed only as an advisory role. It had no legal or authority to tell nations what to do. It was primarily or to control nations or to manipulate nations. And that's what we're starting to see a little bit of now is its fingers in national events and circumstances and in ways that can be quite worrisome in the long run. So uh, from a shift towards a purely advisory role now to the WHO, particularly now as a global healthcare guru, is what they would make themselves out to be. It's become an issue of what their ultimate role is going to be. So, in terms of its content and its makeup, its structure, it's really got six major components to it. There's the what they call the Economic and Social Council. There's United Nations General Assembly. There's the Secretariat. There's the United Nations Internal Court of Justice. And there's United Nations Security Council, as you know, as the permanent members. And then there's United States Trusteeship Council. Those are kind of the six main structures of United Nations. Now, under those, they have a lot of agencies. There are 15 different agencies. And this is where I want you to think about these agencies. It's kind of interesting that as I read through these, its fingers reach into the areas of banking, finance, healthcare, and social issues in nations' lives. It even goes into the educational aspect of nations' lives. So here's some of the more important ones, and think about this in terms of national, or I'm sure global economy. First of all, there's the World Bank. There's the World Health Organization, or WHO, you're familiar with. There's International Monetary Fund, IMF, that regulates loans to countries and nations. There's United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. There's there's United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and then there's telecommunications. There's United Nations International Telecommunications Union. So it's got links, at least, to telecommunications, education and culture, finance, and healthcare. So in this umbrella, we've got the makeups of a huge organization that can affect a lot of different countries if it's allowed to make that transition from advisory role to one of an authority. And that's where the WHO comes in, is the WHO now wants to be the authority of healthcare over the globe. And keep in mind that the mindset of United Nations is one of a global picture. They are not particularly interested in one specific nation's well-being. They're interested in an egalitarian role where there's a leveling out of wealth, and you can see that in that the favoritism that's shown to specific countries and the bias against countries that have means. Their whole role, my sense is at least, is to level out the playing field. They have a global egalitarian perspective, and in order to accomplish those goals, they need to be able to manage and manipulate countries. Now, how do we go about doing that? Well, uh, there's part of the problem that we have now is that it's wanting to become involved in controlling how countries do their own sovereign um, activities. For example, healthcare probably is the most recent one with COVID. Um, when COVID first came out, uh, what was the big authority? Well, WHO came out right away and said, well, this or that or the other thing, and half of it was true, half of it was falsity. But they were regarded as the global uh, centerpiece for information regarding COVID. Yet they did not investigate China right away. It wasn't until months and I think a year or so later that they finally got into China, and they were prevented from actually going into the lab where the virus allegedly spread from. So they really didn't accomplish anything when it came to that. But yet they felt that they had the authority to to do that and the authority to tell people how they should handle COVID. So that's just one example of how their reach now is trying to become more, how do you say it, more invasive, more, I guess, invasive
More
and
widespread,
pervasive.
yeah, invasive,
Yeah.
yeah.
So do you have a sense of that at all, Aaron, or not?
Yeah, I mean, I was just kinda jotting down some notes as you were talking that, you know, I talk about setting a precedent all the time about, that this is the beginning of a slippery slope, and maybe the first thing we did on that beginning of the slippery slope is to, give a certain group some power to overreach on something or overlook, see the bigger picture. And at that time, those people that we give the power are in it for the best in your best interest. But
Yeah.
we've gone the UN, like you said, was created to be a coming together of nations where you could, air your grievances about another country, and you could get some arbitration before you go to war with that country or whatever with the council of other countries. We're just kind of a big organization, so the network, kind of like if you joined a business group that in your field, if you joined a doctor's group, or if you know and you could share your like-minded ideas and stuff like that. And then we had war. A war came out, and so the UN, trying to keep peace, everybody donated so many soldiers to the UN. And then the UN doled out those soldiers to the places that they needed. And so now the UN has a security force.
Yeah.
And then the UN says, well, we've got a security force. So now we need, now we can, we'll get some people that are knowledgeable in healthcare or in um science, or or education, or whatever that the world needs. And we'll try to advise on that instead of bringing those people from their countries. Now the UN is kind of working on their own as their own entity. And yes, we still come together, and we speak at the UN summit, but the UN itself has enough body to it nowadays that, yeah, like you said, it's starting to kind of rule itself, and it's starting to, like you said, put its hands in other people's business.
Yeah.
And
I think
so,
yeah, I ask myself sometimes, I mean, is it wrong to be wary of these large global organizations like the United Nations or the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, the European Union? Is it wrong to be wary of these large organizations or have a little caution? And the reason I think that people are a little wary is that uh, some of these are very quickly politicized. These very quickly become political megaphones for narratives. And the other thing is, there's no real safeguards. There's no uh, accountability to them. So if they want to do something that it by fiat and declare, well, this is going to be what it is, they're not bound by election like we are in the United States, a democratic nation, they can do whatever they darn well want to do because they don't have to be accountable to
Right.
a nation or the nation's population or populace. So I think it stands to reason that these large global organizations need to be looked at with a large degree of scrutiny because uh, they can go off rail pretty easily and not be accountable to anybody and not have any way of safeguarding them from doing that. The other big thing is when you think about that is that you know there's a tendency for legacy media to say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theorist, you're a conspiracy theorist, yada yada yada, whenever you
Right.
question something that is maybe beyond its bounds or beyond what the legacy media feels is right and proper. But I think the difference is kind of a difference of philosophical basis. There's people who kind of live by principle, and when they go into something, they try to examine it, analyze it, reflect on it, sometimes even test what works and what doesn't work, and think of what it might result in both the short term and the long term before a decision is made. So they follow more of a prescriptive way of making decisions. But on the flip side, there are those who are more reactionary. They let anything in the world happen, whatever they want to. And then after the fact, they say, oh, this isn't working so well. Well, it's too late to do anything about it. It's established and we've got to go with it. And we end up with circumstances, and you can name thousands of circumstances that happen in our country's government and other countries where an idea has gotten unleashed without any safeguards or serious thought for what the ultimate consequences would be. And obviously, the most current one is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence now is used by big tech. We use it all the time, but are there any safeguards established? No. Is there any organization that has control over it? No. Our uh, Senate and Congress are having debates over it, but nothing's been done. So it's going to be after the fact when things start to go sour that people are going to look backwards and say, gee, why didn't we do something beforehand? Well, that's the reactionary approach to issues. Now, you take all that and you put it into a sense of skepticism or caution around big uh, global institutions. That's why a lot of people have that skepticism. They don't want to wait until the horse is out of the barn. They want to think ahead and try to prevent things from happening. So that's why I think people need to understand that the skepticism or the caution or the worry about these big global uh, institutions gaining power or authority it's important to do that. It's important people understand. And we can get into some specifics, and we'll do that in a moment. But do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, and if you look at it I mean, look at the founding fathers of our country. It's only been a couple hundred years, and they were coming out of a battle with a country
You're
that
right.
was
Yes,
colonizing all over the
you're right.
world, and we were part of that colonization, and we were getting taxed because we weren't and because we weren't right there in that, ready to fight, ready to get into arguments with them and have, there was no representation for us,
Yes, right.
and we were being taxed to high heaven. And I feel like, you know, the farther we go up the chain, the less and less the government cares as much about you as much about the dollar signs that are coming out of you. And so, you know, there are certain things, and this is kind of what I just wrote down, is there are certain things that a government provides for you. or are supposed to provide for you. So they're supposed to be to give you the opportunity to get to have your needs met.
Yes.
However they do that is however they do that. So a country like the US, when we first started out as the United States, as a free nation, we provided a sense of security.
Right.
We had a security force. And so you start checking off the boxes. UN security force. Check. And then they provided us a monetary system, some kind of system to be able to trade between its citizens, right?
Yes. Right.
Now the UN has a financial arm to it, the international
Monetary fund,
monetary fund, yeah. And
World Bank.
so we check that box off. And
Mhm.
then and now that we're in modern times, we have um the infrastructure. We have energy, we have, you know, roads and things like that. So they now are dealing with energy and the environment and the new green deal or new whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so we've got that. And now some people think, oh, well, healthcare is nice to have too. And so now they have healthcare. The the UN is a government in all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
There, I
You're
mean,
right. You're
if
right.
you want to follow if you want to follow it, it may not govern all of the countries, but it has the power to govern all countries at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. It
So
very easily
it,
could. Yeah.
if we're not looking at it with some skepticism, then we're not looking at it. That's just we're not, if you're a person in the world and you don't see that, there are some forces for good and some forces for bad, and there are some forces that are almost getting to the point of too big to you know, to be rulable.
Right. Yeah.
This could be one of them. I mean, if you were worried about the US, this is on a scale that's, 120
Right.
times the US because of the 100 and some nations that are part of it.
Yeah. You're right. You raised two really good points that I want to just go back to a little bit. And the first point you raised, I thought was really good, and it going back to the founding fathers. One of the biggest arguments between the colonialists, or the patriots, was how big the government should be. There were the
Right.
Federalists and there were Anti-Federalists, and the Federalists believed in a large, overriding federal government, and the Anti-Federalists argued that they were worried about the too much power being concentrated. They just come, like you said, they've just come from England because King George III or whoever was too powerful. They didn't have freedoms. So they just coming out from underneath a high authoritarian government were very skeptical of having a large, powerful, overriding government. And that's why they fought and fought to establish the Bill of Rights. The Constitution was established first, but the Anti Federalists said, we want more individual rights. And that's when the subsequent Bill of Rights were fought. So that goes way back to our very foundation, is that decision, that discernment. How big do we allow the federal government to become before it is it begins to act independent of the individual people's desires? Remember, Abraham Lincoln in his Gettysburg Address said, he wants a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that's been a premise rich in our tradition, that it is the people's country. It's the people's government. It's not a top-down authoritarian government. It's a bottoms-up government that our representatives should represent us. So, the other issue that I thought was really good you raised is that of the distance between an individual person, and not only our federal government, but you add another layer of complexity to things in a global scale. How is an individual person or a group of person going to have any bearing on what the United Nations does? The further removed you get from a person or individual person or group, the more layers you build, the more bureaucracy you build. There's no way in God's blue heaven you're going to have any effect on what the elitists of a large global population are going to do. So you lose all sense of control or safeguards or safety when you get large organizations making decisions independent of what their populace desires. So that
Right.
extra layer I thought was really a good point you brought up, because the further removed organizations are from uh, individual people, the less control and less accountability they have.
Well, and that's one thing actually, I mean, just to, like, really, hammer that point home is in my little town, we are actually dealing with a major issue with the school board. We have 2 or 3 members on the school board that are just that fight against each other, and that are just abstinent about doing anything. Like, the fighting just does nothing. And
Uh-huh.
at this level, once that's done, you can just basically say, "Okay, well, we'll vote you out next year." And so, or every 2 years, whatever their actual, term is. And that's quick and easy. And so the farther you go up that chain, the less you know about those people, the less they know about you,
Exactly
the
right.
more
That's
people
really
it
true.
takes to get
Yes.
together. And so at the state level, we had a special election um, for an amendment to our Constitution that would create a supermajority. To change the
Oh.
Constitution, you need the supermajority, the 60% of
Okay.
votes. And so, and I had people on both sides from all walks of life. They're like, "Well, but the abortion rights people are gonna come in and change the law. They can get the money to." And I said, and so we gotta get to the supermajority because it's harder to get to that. They said, "But I don't want the government to be hard to change. I want it to be that point where, like, if we make a bad decision, let's run that bad decision back. I don't want it to be 50 years on Roe versus Wade."
Yeah.
You know? It took
Yeah.
50 years to run
Yeah.
a bad decision back.
Right.
And so on this, if the state makes a terrible decision and we do end up voting for this issue 1 that's coming up that gives, women the right to abortions in the state of Ohio, and allows, and it takes away a lot of the parental rights for, transitioning kids and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
then I want it to be as easy as they took to get it there, as easy to roll it back.
Yeah. That's
So
really, yeah.
So
That,
I was kind of a lot of people were like, "Oh, but this way it's," and I said, "No, no, let's keep the government movable." It's been 175 years, I think, with the state of Ohio. It's worked for us for this long. Let's keep it movable. Let's keep things going.
yeah.
So,
That's and that your point is really should be emphasized, because once laws are made anymore, it's hard to change them. So your point is we need to keep the government flexible enough that they respond to the people's wishes, and with that's
right.
we yeah, and we've forgotten that.
And honestly, going up the level, the government used to be accessible.
Yeah.
Some dude from Ohio got on a train, rode around the country on a train, and every stop he did, he made a speech and he got elected president.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and he was and it wasn't that he just, he was the nationally known he was the least known person. Grover
Right.
Cleveland wasn't known by anybody,
Yeah.
but he went on this, I think it was 82 stop train tour,
Wow.
and every town they stopped at, he made a 5 to 15-minute speech, jumped back on the
Yeah.
train,
Yeah.
and he got press at every stop and everything
Yeah.
as he got going, and with just that little bit of grassroots movement, he's
Sure.
probably one of the greatest grassroots presidents that we ever
Yeah.
had, that
Yeah.
just, came out of nothing, worked had no national recognition, had built himself an empire, and,
But he was
became
but he was among the people and he
that's
knew the
it.
people. And that's your
That's it.
point. Yeah.
Is that he could govern from that. And that's why at one point, all in the beginning, um, the same thing was with Congress. Congress was a part-time job, which is why you think they're never working, is because it's still scheduled as a part-time job. You can go home, you could work a job, you could do that thing. And so in the beginning, they had their farms to work, and they had
Yeah.
their jobs
That's
and
true.
land and all that.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
would once or twice a year, they would go for a month or go for a few weeks and do the work of the country for only a few it only took a few weeks because the country was small, it was flexible, it was
Yeah.
movable. And now we've gotten to the point where we can't even elect a speaker of the house.
Yeah. That's
And,
really sad.
you
Yeah.
know, so but this, essentially, the farther we go out, the farther we move it from
Yeah.
your local government, the less the less they care about your actual care or what you actually think, and the more they can just put in what they want to think and what they want, to be as the government. So,
Right.
you didn't want healthcare. I told somebody during one of the elections, they come up to me and, "Oh, are you voting for the man?" And this was during Obama's election, and I said, "Well, I guess if you want to talk about the white guy that owns a business, because that's who the man is, right?" And she's like, "Well, I don't want to buy a insurance company." I said, "Well, you bought AIG just last week."
Yeah. Yeah.
And she goes, "What?" I said, "AIG is one of the largest insurance companies in the world,
Yeah.
and the country just bought AIG, so congratulations. You're a
Yeah.
proud insurance company
Sure.
owner because you love the government so much."
Yeah.
And, she had no idea how to respond to that. I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't talk like a pirate because it was Talk Like a Pirate Day," and I said, "R, have a great day," and walked
Yeah.
away. And so it was just, it's just the education level of where we're at, people there are good people out there.
Oh
And
yeah.
most of those
Huh.
people are the people that you surround yourself with that
Yeah.
care about you.
Yeah.
Those people aren't in Washington because they don't know you.
Yeah. They
And
don't.
so they're not
Yeah.
going to take great care of you. They're going to
Yeah.
take great care of the people that they know and the
Yeah.
people that they love
Yeah.
and the
Well,
people that get them elected and get them money.
yeah, and you touch on another great point, and that is the lack of transparency in large organizations. They don't know. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know the things that large global organizations are planning. Here's one for you about the WHO now from the United Nations wants to develop a new body called the INB. It's called an Intergovernmental Negotiating Body. So they're going to put up for a vote, I think, this spring in 2024. And the purpose of this is quote, to act upon potential rather than actual emergencies. So they can say, well, we think this might happen. They can act on whatever they think or whatever they construe might happen and allow the Director General of the WHO control over the production of medication that may be allotted as he or she deems fit. So they are now developing a uh, authoritarian position, a body within the NHO that can act uh, even on suspicions of a pandemic. And that, in my way of thinking, that means they can do whatever they want to, whenever they want to, and say, we're worried about this. And also, then they have the control over the production of medication that may be allotted or allocated as he or she, the general director, seems fit. So now you're placing control within a body unelected by anybody else within the WHO, and they're not even publicizing this. People don't know about this. They're not being transparent about this. They're not asking for public discussion of this. This is something behind closed doors that is not being transmitted or expressed to other people. So it's those kinds of things. If we allow those, and it's like you mentioned before, it's a slippery slope. Once this gets started, then there's going to be another uh, action. Now, I mean, here, stop and think about this. The Paris Climate Accord that was signed years ago. Well, that is an offshoot of the United Nations initiative. Those individuals who signed that signed legally binding agreements. So why are we signing legally binding agreements with a large global initiative that we did not vote about? You know, we didn't vote for it. We don't. Why should a sovereign nation for something like that? Voluntary, fine. I mean, if you want to have a voluntary agreement, that's fine, and that's the way things should be. But to make it legally binding and then give another organization the control over that seems to me a little short-sighted. So those are two examples, and we haven't even got into digital passports and digital currency yet, but those are even more onerous, where the WHO now wants to follow up with what the European Union does in terms of having a health passport. You have to have your certain number of vaccinations to COVID on a card, includes your driver's license and some other medical information to transfer, or move between country to country or into the EU. And that's going to be monitored by what? AI. So artificial intelligence is going to monitor who has these passports, who doesn't have these passports, who can move freely, and who can't move freely. So now we've got a means for a large organization to manipulate how people can move freely between countries and within countries. Can't go into certain restaurants, if you don't have that. So you move that and you think, well, that's just one little silly example. Well, China does this now all the time. They have digital currency now that monitors people's use, and they're rated by whether they're government friendly or government against the government, I should say. So this whole idea of passports and labeling people and monitoring people, which would be very easy to do in the world of AI, is soon to be the case. And you add artificial intelligence to the financial industry and digital currency, then they will be able to track every transaction you make, how you invest your money, and then be able to, with AI, incentivize you or disincentivize you to spend money on this or that according to what the government's or the global organization's narrative is. So that's why I think it's important to be a little skeptical. We need to watch these things and monitor these things and be involved in these things. And that's why I like what you're doing with your podcast, is that you're trying to educate people to what's going on in the world and to encourage people to think about those things more. They're serious things.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that you're talking about have serious implications and have changed even in since we've talked before. I mean, we talked about, you know, the digital currency, and at that time, China was just using the digital currency for industrial, monitoring and stuff, making
Right,
sure they paid their taxes and that,
right,
and
right.
that was
Starts.
it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that
right.
was their shtick on it, is
Yep.
that we're just going to use it to pay the taxes. And now, as you've said, they're monitoring everybody's purchases and decide, giving them a score based on your purchases. And you don't think they're going to do that in a second if you're on a health passport, if you're a smoker, if you choose
Sure.
to drink, if
Right,
anything that would be detrimental, they and that's what I said. When they don't know you, you become a dollar sign.
right.
So
Yeah,
if you're a dollar sign that detracts from their dollar signs, then they're going to search out ways to lessen your detraction, or they're going to search out ways to delete your subtraction. You take that however you feel, whether that deletion is, they're trying to get you into a different system or get you to be no longer part of the system. That's the conspiracy theory, I'm sure. But if you look at it at face value, that if you had if you bring this back to the analogy of, you know we pay an electric bill, and every month you're going to pay something.
right.
That's just bottom line. But I can lower the bill by turning off a light, by lowering my thermostat down 2 to 5 degrees. And so I'm now deleting things, I'm now taking away things that I would normally just do willy-nilly, because it now cost me something. So
Hmm.
if you cost somebody something, they're going to lessen that ability for you to cost them.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
and it's not, it's not a mean thing, but that's just human nature, is
yeah,
that we're going to keep us alive before we, put the mask on our child on
yeah,
an airplane. Keep yourself alive, because you
yeah,
can't then affect the good.
right,
You don't can't control what's going on if you're dead.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's the deal.
Yeah, I just don't think that people have thought through governments, thought through this whole idea of passports and monitoring and collecting data on people. If they were, here's a question for you. If they were really benevolent about this, being able to monitor and track people, then why don't they experiment first on criminals who have been released from prison, or drug abusers, known drug abusers, or pedophiles? So why don't you put a computer chip in them underneath their skin and track and monitor them? Well, we can't do that because that transect or that's against their individual personal rights. Well, but we can do it for the rest of the
For the
civilization,
mass
or
population, yeah.
for COVID. Why don't we, if we really want to control people's behavior and limit their freedom of movement, why don't you try it on people who are known to cause harm to society first? Why don't we?
Well, because we need those people. We need
I
people
don't
to
know.
cause harm, because any kind of calamity is definitely a good way to make you the changes that you want to make.
Well,
So
that's
if there
true
weren't
too.
gun
Yeah,
violence, we couldn't control the gun population. If there
yeah,
wasn't if there you know if there weren't all of these mass shootings lately, we wouldn't be able to make the laws about, you
yeah,
know congregating in large groups. If there wasn't
yeah,
an insurrection, which we're finding out there wasn't, um, then we wouldn't be able, then they wouldn't be able to put together more security protocols.
Yeah.
Because honestly, something I heard this week also is in the insurrection that the areas that those people were in were free areas if COVID wasn't involved.
Uh-huh. Okay. See,
And
I don't
so
know.
they would have been able to walk freely in those areas no matter what.
Yeah.
But because COVID was involved, they had to go through a security checkpoint, and the reason that they're saying they
Yeah.
trespassed is because they busted through the security checkpoint. And so people are going to prison for 7 or 8 years
Yeah.
for a rule that was made during a pandemic.
Yeah.
See how this all comes back
Sure.
around?
Sure. Yeah.
And, that was started, you know, so it's,
See,
it's all a good way, it all starts with a good bit of, we're trying to help people,
yeah. Well,
and then
it's painted with a whitewash of we're trying to do something benevolent or that's innocent enough. Well,
right,
innocent enough soon leads to this is the way it's going to be, and then once it becomes this is the way it's going to be, then it's codified in saying that's law and you've got to comply or else.
right.
And then you pay the penalties for that. That was started out as, quote,
You were fine
innocent.
when the law started.
So I think skepticism is a good thing for our country. It's always been a good thing for our country. It doesn't mean that it should be mean or spiteful or vilifying people, but healthy skepticism to just take a step back and say, what's really happening? Do I really see what's going on behind the curtains? Do I understand what it is? What's it going to mean in the short term? What's it going to mean in the long term? Before decisions are made, I think that's something we need, especially now more than ever. That discernment, that trying to see what's really going on is so crucial. And I think that's something the general population in America has lost is that ability to discern what's really going on amidst all the chatter, all the clutter. And that's something we have to work really hard uh, at as private citizens is to really to read, to think, to discuss clearly, to debate, to think logically and rationally, to look at the long term as well as the short term. Um, but I think sometimes we're far too short sighted. And this whole thing with the United Nations and beginning now to have more and more control into people's movements, freedom of transportation, freedom of travel. Um, that's something we really ought to think long and hard about before that goes any further, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this week is National Disarm Week. Dialogue, not arms. The UN is
Okay.
has put
All right.
together a disarmament program where you can bring in your weapons, and they want to a dialogue and negotiation.
Sure.
And so this is the week for that. They
I
have
see. Okay.
different things all over the country, and so it's like you said. I Obviously a health passport could be a great thing. I
Mhm.
can see the positives where all of your health information is in one spot, and
Yeah.
you go on, say you go on vacation and you get bitten by a shark. Let's go crazy. And they need to pump blood into you. And so now they have all of the information that says that you're this type of blood type, you've had issues with this kind of medication or this kind of additive to the blood or anything and so then they can provide you the best case scenario, the best care based on your actual individual health needs. And that's the good part. That's the thing that would be great about it, is if
Right.
all of your health, because it is kind of discerning sometimes, like, Honest Abe was in an accident and, you know, if he went to a hospital that was not in his group, then his medical information then has to, it took almost a day for him to get his medical information to the hospital.
Hmm.
And so, unless he's conscious, which he wasn't most of the time, um, his fiance or somebody that knows him well enough needs to be there to give the doctor his medical information. And other than his fiance is a nurse, which is lucky, um, most people wouldn't have a support to do that. So this would be great. But the problem is in the short term already, they're not allowing you to they're using it as a weapon to not allow you to move across the country, not allow you to go to certain places. You even said certain restaurants won't let you in
Hmm.
if you don't have the card or the passport saying that you've gotten all your vaccinations. I mean, when did we become a nation that or a people that is okay with you do this or you don't do anything? I mean, we didn't allow it with the color of your skin, and now we're and now we're not now we're allowing it with something that you menially put in your body.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, you can say all of the you're protecting the grandpas or the if you want to protect them, stay at home, don't come out, don't think, don't talk to us anymore, don't vote, don't help us out, just stay and protect yourself and don't participate in the world.
Hmm. Yeah.
That would just help us out a lot more if you're not going to think for yourself. Just stay in your own little space, ball yourself in your basement and just, you know, until the end, just stay there and don't don't involve yourself in the world. But
Yeah.
like you said also, and this is just continuing on the rant, I guess, but one thing you said also about the forefathers and wanting the smaller they wanted a smaller government. They a lot of most
Yeah.
of them were into
Yeah.
that, and their biggest reason why is because they were worried about an educated public.
Hmm.
They were worried that the public didn't have enough time at that time to read the paper. A lot of them weren't educated in the ability to read, and so they didn't know what was going on in the
Hmm.
nation or in the local area even. And so they worried about an educated public. Now we have all of the resources like sitting right in our
Yeah.
hand at any time of the day, and you still like we're still not in I mean, you're seeing the videos of kids just, you know, who's the Secretary of State?
Yeah.
Who's this? And
Yeah.
they're like, who who was Thomas
Yeah.
Jefferson? Oh, he
Yeah.
was the 32nd president. What? You know,
We're still on. What you're saying is we're still uneducated.
we're still an uneducated populace, and we've even talked about we we talked
Yeah.
about this like 3 weeks ago on the voting side of things is like, you know, have we educated ourselves enough to even like vote for certain things
Yeah.
or for
Yeah.
certain people because we said, it's sad that you think, the person you think is the best for the job is not the person you think can get elected for the job.
That's true. Yeah. That's a
And
sad
so
situation.
yeah, it's a sad situation because
Yeah.
you should if you were the best for the job, you should be able to get your voice out there. There should be
Right.
a mechanism,
Yeah.
which the Republican Party is supposed to be that mechanism
Yeah.
to get your voice out there as the best candidate and
Yeah.
get you out there and get you elected. But we can't even get together,
Yeah.
and I very, very loosely say we, because the more and more that I stand on this earth, the less and less I want to stand with the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, or I've even said that they're both funerals because there ain't parties anymore. There's nothing to cheer about. And so I've said, the more and more we do this, the less and less they can I mean, the Democrats in the House have voted completely together this whole time. Had
Yeah.
we just done that, Like, had
Yeah.
25 people not gotten all up in their feelings about, "This guy took out our friend as the speaker."
Yeah.
It's
It's a
not
lot of
about your friend. It's not
yeah.
about your family. It's about the country
Yeah.
in general, and you've
There's
made
just
us l
a lot of petty behavior.
That's
Yeah.
it.
See, you would make a good libertarian, Aaron.
I kinda lean
We'll
that
have to
way,
do a
yes.
podcast on libertarians sometime.
The problem with the libertarians is we have even less money and even less organization, and, because we don't want a giant organization
Okay.
or a lot of money, and so we don't get
Okay.
elected. But,
Okay. All right. Well,
yes, that's why I said I
okay.
very, very loosely, aligned myself in the Republican sector, probably a little far right
You
for that,
see,
but
you don't even have to carry that label, whether you're Democrat or Republican. You can just be a conservative, an
right.
independent conservative that believes in values and principles, and leave it at that. See,
And
that's it.
that's and that's it probably, that's it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Good.
Individual free thinkers. We've been trying
Yes.
to
Right.
we've
Right.
been putting on, with the new website and, the new pages, we're cultivating a society of individual free thinkers.
Good. Good. And that's what we need. That's what we need. Yep. So good.
So, I guess, I mean, this pretty much has summed up. Do you have anything else on the UN that
No, not too much. I'll just throw out this out there just for people's information, just to give you a flavor for the UN. You know, the UN has the Human Rights Council. Well, just so you know how that works, there's 47 countries in the Human Rights Council. Now, have you
Okay.
ever sat on a committee that's more than 4 or 5 that ever gets anything done? No, 47 people. And not to make it, well, just to add the frosting to the cake here, they recently elected both Cuba and China to the Human Rights Council, both of which
Oh, that
have
seems
terrible human rights uh, history. And so that I just throw that out there. Not that we need to chat about it, but it's just for people's information about how the well or unwell the United Nations functions and why it functions not always to the benefit of freedom and liberty. So
and
I just toss that out there. You can wrap it up.
yeah, definitely. It's, and it's not there's no, like, yes, there's some votes on it and stuff like that. Some countries vote and things, on certain things, but like you said, 47 people, 40, if they say two minds, if you're a person of two heads, that you're unstable. I mean, think about a body of 47 heads.
Yeah,
Um,
I
it's
don't. Yeah,
chaos at best.
yeah,
And yeah, you add human rights organizations like China and Cuba that, I mean, that would be like, it's like, adding Iran. We've had a
yeah,
bunch of articles. If you go on the website, we have an article right now about the morality police, for Iran,
uh,
and how there's another person who now can no longer speak, and is paralyzed because of the morality police. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, and I'm sure that for every one article we see,
Oh,
there are
bet you're
hundreds
right.
and hundreds of
Yeah,
issues with the morality police
yeah. I bet you're right. Yeah,
in Iran or different or other countries,
yeah,
because they're not the only ones that have a morality police.
yeah,
Um, you know, any Muslim state has morality police.
yeah.
So I don't think for a minute that, in the next few years that Germany is not going to have a morality police. Also,
Right.
they're one of
Yeah,
the new large Muslim countries.
yeah.
So, but anyhow, that's for another
All right.
podcast.
Okay.
But, yeah, it's just great stuff. Good times thinking about, how that we can be overwatched even better by an even bigger organization. The things that keep you up at night, right? That's,
Yes. Sir.
just, how this goes down. And, we've talked in the last few weeks and months about, you know, if this is the end times, this could be how it goes down, and we may not know how it goes down, but
Yeah.
just keep your head on a swivel. Just keep
Yeah.
thinking about, keep your eyes open, and so that, there's not a lot you can do to stop it. But keep your eyes open so that you know how to make your next play.
Mhm.
Whether that play is, is something that you are, rich and famous, and you can get into the right circles, and you can get some things done and change things, then all power to you. But if you're just sitting in your man cave studio, putting out the word, then you do what you got to do,
Yeah.
and just make sure you keep your eyes open to that. So again, check out our website, help us out. We need some funding, we need some help, we need support. Even if that's just getting on and listening to the podcast from time to time, that definitely helps. But get on there and keep going.
Remember to follow, like, and share the Why I'm Angry podcast across all social media platforms and anywhere you get your podcast. The Why I'm Angry podcast ends now.